Thank you everybody for joining us, and welcome to our lunch seminar with Jessica Robinson with the topic Women Who Invest. I went through the list of guests before the meeting, and I believe I have met most of you previously. But for those who are new to the network and are with us for the first time, my name is Claudia Sangalini, and I'm chairwoman of Kvinnokapital. So I will give you a very short update on Kvinnokapital before letting Anna Hedström introduce the event and lead the discussion with our guest, Jessica Robinson.
Mute on.
Kvinnokapital, sorry. Okay. Kvinnokapital is a network of almost 250 women working in asset management in the Nordics. And it is a non-profit organization with the goal to empower women. And we do this by building a strong network of contacts and exchange experience, share knowledge, inspire each other, and support each other. And we do this mainly via gathering, getting together, lunch sessions, afternoon seminars, after work, walk and talk. And of course, also our very popular gala dinner that we hope to be able to realize again as soon as possible. And the pandemic has clearly affected us a lot, as we love meeting and, really chatting and have physical meetings so we can get to know each other. But of course, physical meetings have not been so much of an option in the last 2 years. We have, however, switched to digital events. They're not really as fun as meetings in person, but the format has worked really very well, I have to say. We have had very good attendance, and we have really had very nice sessions in the last 2 years. Kvinnokapital also has a board of 9 women, and the board takes care of organization of different events and activities, as well as day-to-day operations, running of day-to-day operation. But our strength really comes from our members. So members are highly encouraged to reach out to us, to propose events, recommend content, and support the network with new ideas and initiatives. So this is really a network of women for women. If we come to today's event, this virtual event with Jessica Robinson is the first one of a new series of events under the title Women Who Invest. And here we want to inspire women to take better investment decisions for their own savings. So we aim to have more events under this series during the first half of the year. And in the spirit of Kvinnokapital culture, we actually turn to our members and invite them to contact us if you think that you have any good speaker or topic for this category. So we will be very happy to listen to your suggestions and work with you to realize the events. So with no further ado, I will let the word to Anna Hedström. She's also a member of the Kvinnokapital board, and she will introduce our guest, Jessica Robinson, and she will also lead the discussion today. So please, Anna.
Thanks for that, Claudia. And yeah, as you said, we're so happy to have Jessica Robinson with us here today. Let me first introduce Jessica with a few words. So I actually had the pleasure to meet Jessica for the first time, I think it's about 6 years ago, during my stay in Hong Kong. Back then, Jessica was head of UNPRI Asia and was a very frequent speaker at events around sustainability in Hong Kong. And after one of these events, I approached her and we had a pretty long chat, and that was followed by some early morning coffees. And already back then, I remember being struck by the high energy level and very ambitious plans that Jessica had back then. One of the plans was to start an insights, education, and community platform, empowering women as responsible, sustainable, and impact investors. And that was the beginning of Moxie Future, where I had the pleasure to be part of that for a year. But Jessica had even bigger plans, and earlier this year, she published her first book on financial feminism, A Woman's Guide to Investing for a Sustainable Future. And in addition to being an entrepreneur and author, Jessica is also a sought-after advisor on topics of sustainable finance and responsible investing. So with that, warm welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
just a few words on the setup for the next, I guess, 55 minutes we almost have. The idea is really to make it very interactive, and we invite all of you participants, all members, to ask questions that come up. And I think the easiest way is to either write the question in the chat or raise your hand, and then Claudia will invite you to ask the question. But I would like to kick it off with a first question, and then please join in. So as Claudia mentioned, Jessica, you're the first speaker of this new series of events on the topic of women who invest. And the idea, as Claudia said, is really to inspire women to make better investment decisions. So if we talk about women and wealth, what are the main trends that are happening, and how is that affecting the investment world?
Thanks, Hannah. Hello to everyone. And I was just laughing with people before that I'm having internet problems. So I'm sitting in my teenage daughter's bedroom because it's the strongest internet connection I can get. So sorry about the background. And I'm actually in Dubai. So Hannah and I met, yes, several years ago when we both lived in Asia, and I've been in Dubai for the last few years. So I'm that's why it probably looks like I'm quite warm as well in my t-shirt, and I'm guessing for most of you it's quite cold. So, I mean, this whole discussion around women and wealth, I honestly think sometimes these conversations, when it comes to women and money, for some reason seem to be quite awkward. Perhaps many reasons why. And I think discussions like this are very important, so we can really explore what's happening and open up those discussions, particularly around women's financial empowerment, because I think that's really what the crux of this is about. So when we look at women and wealth, I think there are a number of really key trends that have certainly driven a lot of my work that I do with Moxie Future and through the book. So the first one is that women really now control a very significant chunk of the world's wealth. So we're looking at, I think it's about 32% of global private wealth. And this is very much expected to grow annually. In fact, I think they're looking at it, recent estimates looking at it doubling every decade. And the important thing behind that is it's increasingly self-generated. So women in work, women as business owners, as opposed to inheritance or through divorce or alike. And this is very much a worldwide phenomenon. So we're really waking up to that tremendous economic power that women have. Women, I talk often about women being economic powerhouses because we're creating, we're controlling, and we're influencing such a huge amount of wealth. And I think when you look at the investment industry, women are now finally, and it sounds ridiculous, but women are now finally seen as a very important customer segment. And I think we're starting to see that in the research that's coming out and the way that things are marketed to women as financial decision makers. And at the second other trend, which I think is quite important, also relevant to this group, is that more and more women are working in the financial industry itself. And I think, again, this is changing the landscape, because we know, obviously, with more women in the workplace, with educational progress, in terms of women being so much more integral to economic plans at a national level, more visibility at board and senior management level. But this is obviously very much trickling down and redirecting corporate strategies and products and services. And that includes the investment industry. As I said before, we're actually finally seeing products and services now marketed to women as investors. So I think the sort of wakening up of the financial investment industry is really, really important. And then the final third trend that's very significant is we have a better understanding of what women want when it comes to investing. I should add that I think this is a fairly new understanding. I mean, as Hannah knows, I was very passionate about this about 5-6 years ago because I was so frustrated that there seemed to be, the investment industry is still very much a male default. And one thing that was very evident to me is that women care about the bigger picture. So in terms of consumers, as employees, but significantly as investors. And this really sits at the core of what I talk about when I talk about financial feminism. We did some research and we did a global survey and we looked at, I was just thinking the geographies we covered. So China, the US, Australia, the UK, and Germany. really to understand what women have in terms of investor preferences. And we found that 83% of women care about where their money is invested. 69% feel a sense of urgency to invest responsibly. And those data points have been backed up by the various wealth managers, banks, academics as well, that there is a very telling observation that women are very, very motivated to think about the impact of their investment choices. So I think with all those three trends coming together, we're at a really exciting moment in time when I think we're going to see a lot of movement. And actually, you know, it's a time for us to really come together and have these discussions.
Sorry, I'm monitoring both the chat and if someone is raising hands. I don't see any question at this stage. So, but I invite all our participants to, you know, just don't be shy. Just, you know, ask as many questions as possible to Jessica. I have a question. I was thinking about the pandemic. And, you know, we have been, there's a lot of, you know, discussion about the fact that women and diversity have taken a step back during the pandemic. And I'm not sure, you know, with regard to women who invest, if you have seen also a step back in that direction, or maybe actually women are more like at home taking care of their economic situation. I don't know if you have any insight in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one thing, and certainly when I wrote the book, I didn't want to focus too much on all the sort of gaps and what we don't have and the challenges. But I do think it's important that we acknowledge some of those, because until we acknowledge them, we have to actually find solutions to move forward. And I think the pandemic has made it all the more challenging for women in terms of their financial empowerment, their financial well-being as well, because we have, you know, I think most of us know how difficult it's been in terms of our work, our children, and so forth. I mean, when you look at the sort of financial gaps that women face, right? We know there's a gender pay gap. We know this gets a huge amount of coverage, and yet we're still something like 200 years behind on economic parity, which I think all of us are just shocked. I mean, how can that still be the case in 2021? The gender investing gap is huge. Women are simply not investing as much as men, and we can talk a little bit later about why, what it may be behind that. We're leaving more in cash than men tend to. You know, there's the gender funding gap, and something that I'm incredibly passionate about in terms of funding female founders. I mean, when you look at the stats, and again, when you look at what happened in COVID, when you look at VC funding of female founded businesses, right, it's something ridiculous, like 2%. And it actually got worse during COVID. Women got even less share of the pie to build those businesses. There are things like the gender pricing gap. Again, we talk about the pink tax, you know, where women are paying more for certain feminine products, hygiene products and the like. There's actually even something around the gender debt gap. So there's research that evidences that women pay more for certain types of debt than men do. And all of these are manifesting in the pension gap, right? So we're sort of earning less. We're facing all these other challenges, and generally we live longer and we tend to have more care responsibilities as we get older as well. So you sort of leave this situation where it's sort of not really a level playing field. And I think to your point about COVID and the pandemic, it's actually made it harder. And I think, I don't know what other people think, but I think it calls for even stronger government policy to redress that balance in whatever mechanisms there are, for sure. And certainly in the work that I do on financial feminism, one of the key things is it is getting women to invest more. Then I will obviously come on to my discussion about investing more consciously, so around sustainable investing, but we really need to start investing more, for sure.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One from Hannah and the other one from Sue Petrie. Maybe Sue can go first.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, just unmuting myself. Lovely to meet you, and love everything you do. You were just talking about sustainable investing. So I feel very passionate about the Paris climate goals, you know, where we're going on the whole thing. And when I invest my own money, I'm very frustrated because it looks very green and friendly to invest in all these, you know, tech stocks, things that aren't polluting the planet, but they're not cutting carbon emissions. And what I'd like to see, and I don't know if you see it anywhere in any of the women's things you're involved in, is investing in helping those companies to turn around where it's actually going to make a difference to the companies that are actually polluting the environment, helping them to stop polluting the environment rather than just not investing in them. I don't know if you had any comments on it or if you think there's a right way forward. I mean, I guess this is just a practical point of, you know, I'm quite direct, and I think this is the main event for us, is how we can hit that 1.5 degrees.
Yeah, and so you and I are similar. I mean, climate change is my huge passion. Before I go into that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the proposition behind sustainable investing, just because I'm not sure how familiar everyone is, and just really to explain this sort of concept of financial feminism, because I think, you know, when we talk about financial feminism, obviously it's about equality. And I think, you know, so I talked about the trends and then the gaps. But what's frustrated me, and I think maybe Sue, this touches on your point, is that when we talk about feminism, financial feminism, it's not just about women earning and investing on a par with men. You know, it's really about empowering women to use their money and their wealth to really push for that positive change in the world. So, you know, and this is where I talk about sustainable investing. It's about women investing in companies and sectors that are aligned with their vision of the world, you know, whether that be women supporting other women in business, I touched on. So to your point, whether it's about investing in funds and companies that are really helping us hit that Paris Agreement target. And to me, I think we're missing a beat when we talk about financial empowerment for women as being just about investing. No, it's about women using their voice through their money, through their wealth, to say, look, enough is enough. I don't want to invest in a company that's high polluting. I don't want to be told by my pension fund that I don't have a choice, right? Because, you know, I had this sort of slightly philosophical discussion, you know, wealth and money is a social construct. It's very much there for us to define the world we want to be in. That's the purpose of money. And so why quite often I come at this with the sort of feminist angle, because I'm a little bit tired of being told, these are your only choices. You know, this is the only thing you can do. And I work, you know, my day job is working with institutional investors. So, and I think most of us will agree, most of them are men, but, you know, being told that the only option is to invest in a fossil fuel company because that's maximizing your returns. That's not good enough. You know, that's not the world I want to be in. That's not the industry that I want to be in. So, you know, and I think I talk about trying to create a movement, because I think the more we use our voices as intelligent, wealth-owning, professional women, the more we can push for change in the industry. And I think it needs to come from all angles. You know, so I said my day job is I'm an advisor for institutional investors and regulators, but what about us retail investors, right? We have a voice. And that's why I wrote the book and sort of very much behind what I'm trying to think about. So to your point, so I think it's very challenging. I have to say it's not easy. You know, I'm like you, I'm an environmental economist, so climate to me is very close at my heart. And I sometimes tell this story, and Hannah's probably heard me before, that when I was in Hong Kong, we used to have a mandatory pension fund, and we'd contribute, obviously our employer would contribute. And I remember, at that point, I was running the ASrIA think tank on sustainable finance and responsible investing. I ticked the green fund box, you know, like you do. And then it was about a year later, I actually looked at what was in that fund. And I discovered that the biggest holding was a large US investment bank. Now, the reason they were considered green was obviously as an investment bank, you're just a building, your paper, your business travel. That bank, and I know this, was the biggest financier of coal development in Southeast Asia. So, and what was so ridiculous is that I'm in this industry and it took me a year to find that out. Well, what about all the women who tick the box and then don't have time, or they don't know where to get the information? And I remember thinking, gosh, if I'm doing this and we're all being duped into like green box, you know, the last thing I want to be doing is investing in a US investment bank that's, you know, building more coal power stations all over the world. So yeah, so to your point, I mean, I do understand. The thing is, it's not easy, which is why the more and more pressure that we put on the industry, the more we go to our financial advisors and say, sorry, that's not acceptable, or we go to our bank, or the conversations we have with our partners, or whatever, then I think the better job that we can do in terms of getting that transparency and also demanding the products. I think one of the other challenges here is, you know, for us, accessing things like clean tech funds, you know, it's not been easy. The other story I talk about, my global local bank, where I have bank accounts like in the UK, Hong Kong, and now Dubai. I called them. I said, I've got some cash sitting in my account. Why has nobody called me to see where I want to invest it? And they said, oh, sorry, someone will call you. And I said, but by the way, I'm a sustainable investor. And then the guy on the phone actually said to me, said, sorry, you have to have at least $2 million in your bank account for us to talk about sustainable investing. And at that point, I was like, I mean, I wrote my letter to the CEO.
We might have lost the connection. Hello, Jessica, are you there? Yeah, I think we lost her. She said that she was having trouble with her Wi-Fi. Hopefully she will be back with us soon. Let's see, let's give her a second.
I don't know, maybe somebody else has some comments on sustainable investing.
Yeah, exactly.
Women. It's
maybe we can open to the audience. I don't know if you recognizing what she has talked or said. I kind of recognize myself in a lot of her comments, and so I think she has some good insights. Then clearly everybody experience is different, but yeah, I think especially, you know, talking about the gender funding gap and kind of empower women to use the kind of money and financial help to make a difference. Personally, what I'm trying to do, and the question is how you do that, right? It's easy to say, and it's more like difficult to put in practice. So I'm not sure about, you know, often I think about, you know, our daughters and what we can do for them. So kind of passing on to the younger generations a bit more, you know, comments and pushing them to be bold and learning from the start how to invest their own money. That's what I'm trying to do with my daughter, actually. So that's quite important, I think. Not sure if someone has other comments.
No, I can. One of my questions to Jessica would be, because if I look at my male friends and husband and compare to female friends, I think they are much better at discussing investments among themselves. I mean, every time I overhear them, they have so many discussions around investments, and if it's startups or whatever it might be. And I feel with even my friends, many of them work in the financial industry, for some reason we don't have those same conversations, and I don't know exactly where that comes from, but I definitely see a big difference in how we also support each other when it comes to investments. And
I'm so sorry.
I see Jessica. No problem. I see
Jessica
is
back.
We were just, you know, discussing between ourselves how you know, what you said is very right. But how can you actually in practice empower more women and girls to take, you know, that step? Yeah. Talking about our daughters, and Hannah was commenting that what she sees, and I agree with her, is that men are very good in discussing investment between themselves, while maybe we don't do it to the same extent. We don't support each other to the same extent. So maybe you could comment a bit on that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about my internet today.
No, it's fine. It happens.
Can you believe that I'm sitting in central Dubai and
Yeah.
I can't even, anyway. Do you know, I just want to say something, and I talk about this in my book. There's some really fascinating research that's been done on the media and advertising and how we message to women and men differently about wealth. And if anyone's interested, I can send the link because it's really, really fascinating. They did like a linguistics study, so searching out different words used. So they covered so much media. And we talked to men very much about wealth and about investing as like taking a risk and being more of a man and being strong. And then when it comes to women, we talk about being careful and saving and buying a new handbag. And I read this, and it's quite recent research as well. And I was so astounded. And then I've noticed, so since reading that, any adverts I see about money and investing, I look at it and it's true. It is true. We talk to women in a very different way to the way we talk to men. And I give you another example. I contributed to a paper written by an investment manager on women and wealth. And of course, I was talking about sustainable investing. Do you know what the image was they put on the front cover? A woman in a ball gown looking sexy. And I pointed this out and I said, hello. What, women can only be sexy and, you know, like, it's women and wealth. What are we trying to say to women? So I think, you know, I think we have to take responsibility for how we're messaging. I think there's a lot to do with confidence. And again, those messages, if they're not about strength and the ability to make financial decisions, it's almost as though women are sort of talked down to in that regard. And I don't know what people's experiences are with financial advisors, but I know that's one of those issues that comes up quite a lot in discussions. A lot of women don't feel they understand financial products well enough. But I think there's also it's compounded slightly by a lack of time, and, you know, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we don't have the time, we're not confident, we don't do it, so it doesn't improve. I think some of the language that the industry uses can be a bit intimidating. It's a very male-dominated world anyway, so I think there's also that perception that women, oh, investing's not for me, you know, it's like, it's not something I can do, and so you end up in a situation where we tend to sort of ignore the opportunities. And I think also the comment about men, they sort of come together and they talk about it, and, you know, it's a big bravado type of discussion, which is why, you know, these discussions and these meetings and events are so important, because it's really how we use this financial empowerment to build that confidence, you know, and health and financial health is very much as important as self-care, particularly when you talk about pensions and ensuring that we have enough as we grow older as well. So yeah, and I have 2 teenage daughters, so it's very close to my heart.
I saw Cecilia had probably her raised a hand, but it is disappeared. So I don't know if, Cecilia, you have a question, we can continue or not.
Well, I have a question. Very interesting to listen to, Jessica, and I will buy your book. I haven't read it. I feel a bit ashamed that I haven't read it, but I will do. But I'm a pension fund manager, so I'm struggling quite a lot at the moment, which path I actually can choose and how to communicate with our clients. Personally, I think Paris Align, it's a good way because we are going to work in the direction that we all have decided. But on the other side, if you decide to clearly go that path, then you will higher your CO2 emissions quite a lot in the portfolio, because you will take in companies that you wouldn't if you just go for a low CO2 portfolio. How do you think that you could communicate with the clients? Because I agree with you that the worst thing is that someone tells you to do something and not doing it. So we have been quite we haven't wanted to tell a lot about what we are doing, because we haven't wanted to feel the clients to be disappointed, because we don't want to promise them something that they think will be different. So how in your research and your work, how is the best way to talk to people that are not in the financial industry, that just want to make clear choices? And
So I think there are a couple of issues. If you think about how, when we talk about sustainable investing, we can't fix everything all at once, right? So we have to determine the priorities that we have as an individual, right? I think one of the challenges has definitely been that over the years, there's been a market myth that thinking about non-financial impact will reduce your returns. What we have seen that's not actually the case. And again, the turbulence of the last year or two has also demonstrated that actually a lot of the companies and the funds that have a strong sustainability strategy are quite resilient. So the discussion 5 years ago, and I know because I was doing a lot of it with the big institutional investors, was that, oh no, we can't do ESG because it's a cost burden. It's about reducing returns and so forth. Fortunately, the market has moved very significantly. So if you take something like climate change, and I think what we've seen in the last 2 years certainly is that this has been translated into the financial world, in that we now know that there's no market, there's no financial institution, there's no investor that is going to be immune from the impact of climate change. So from an industry perspective and the way we are sort of increasingly communicating, it's about reducing that risk. So avoiding our exposure to companies and sectors that are less likely to do well in a climate stressed world. So, and then there are other carbon intensive industries such as steel, chemicals, engineering, and they're all likely to be impacted not only by climate change and the physical consequences, but also the new and emerging climate regulations. And I say that as someone sitting in the Middle East doing work for a bank in Saudi, the biggest oil producer in the world. And it's very hard to communicate the significance of what's happening and how that's translated into their investment portfolio. But it is there. So I think that risk piece is obviously a key component. But at the same time, it's not all about downside risk. We essentially radically need to transform the way we work, the way we consume, and the way we live. And I think, looking at that opportunity, the opportunity that comes with the low carbon transition, right? There are so many interesting companies now out there deploying their capital to take advantage of those investment opportunities in climate change. Take, for example, the motor industry. I mean, I know that's probably an easy one to grab because we're all looking at electric vehicles, and I know the market itself is problematic. But I think you've got the risk, but you've also got the opportunity. And I think the more that fund managers, pension funds communicate that with their beneficiaries, with their clients, the more we understand that actually it's not just about the risks that we face. It's actually, look, we're creating a world that's cleaner, that's fairer, that's more just. And I don't know about you, but to me, that positive story is engaging. That's what I want to be part of. And I think for individuals, I think being part of that, I think because we all think about it now as consumers, but you then think about it as investors, as an individual investors, what's good is we're getting a lot of more tools come online for retail investors. So it's easier for us to get behind that low carbon boom. We're seeing equity and bond mutual funds and ETFs that are really created with that low carbon transition in mind. We're seeing companies really start to communicate about their climate strategies. So you can go on, like all the big companies now, when you go on their website and they're producing their sustainability reports, climate change is sort of front and center of that. And I think if you're investing in a company that doesn't have a climate resilience plan, sort of the writing's on the wall, that's probably not the company you want to be investing in, right? And then, looking at different sectors, so energy, natural resources, infrastructure, there's a lot of opportunities. So I think, so the communication, I think the more and more we can talk about that, the better. The other thing, obviously, is the Sustainable Development Goals. And I don't know how familiar everyone is with the SDGs, but and I talk about this actually quite a lot in my book. To me, I see the SDGs as framing, it's like the closest thing we have to our global strategy. So here we have 17 goals that we're trying to get to by 2030. This is what we want our world to look like by 2030. Therefore, for you and I as an investor, those are the companies that are aiming towards those SDGs that we want to get behind. because that's where we're aiming, right? We're not aiming for more oil being taken out of the ground. We're not aiming for fast fashion where the kid, there are child laborers, making our clothes. I mean, this is not the world we want to live in. So why would we be investing in those companies? And why would we be wanting the industry to invest in those companies? So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for us to have a very frank and open conversation about what our values are. I don't think we should shy away from it either.
I have a couple of questions in the chat, actually, and also Hannah has raised her hand. In the chat, Cecilia and Julia, they're asking a bit the same question. So Julia is asking, given your international background, where in the world do you find the most exciting female investing scene? And why do you think women there are more active? And also Cecilia had a similar question where she asked, where do you see stronger trends among women in Asia or in the Middle East compared to Europe about investment? So a bit, what do you see internationally in the market?
I mean, I think Europe is ahead of the curve. I think because the regulatory frameworks have pushed more. So I think it's easier, and there are more tools, there are more products for women in Europe. So I think, I know, for example, in the UK where I'm from, I mean, I haven't lived for many years, but the number of investment apps now just make it so easy. And then sustainable investment apps, so you can literally go, okay, I want low carbon. That did not exist 5 years ago. So I think Europe is like so far ahead. In terms of contrast, I think Asia is catching up for sure. Part of that is driven by wealth being transferred to more women than it used to be. It's just the sort of the trend that now, that's happening globally. One thing I would like to say, and maybe it's interesting to people, because I know the Middle East has a very bad reputation in terms of women, and don't get me wrong, there are reasons why. But what I've been fascinated about living here for the last 4 years is how engaged women are in investment. And actually, I speak at so many events locally now, and there are so many amazing women. One thing I do a lot of here as well, as I mentioned, gender lens investing. So I've been quite active in this space in the region. And there are these amazing companies being set up by women, that need proper capital to really grow. And I think the other thing that to observe, and I think this is a global trend, a lot of female founded companies quite often have a sustainability angle to them. So I'm part of a female angel investor network. And when we see companies come in for us to review and do our due diligence, 9 times out of 10, those companies are trying to fix some kind of societal or environmental problem. And I don't know whether it's sort of the mindset of, we need to solve something, therefore I'm going to set up a company and do. You don't get companies that are sort of, okay, let's just sort of make a quick buck really quickly. So I found that really fascinating as well. And I do think, when you look at, I think that's a global trend, but it's been really interesting to see in the Middle East how that's taken off. I think, the Middle East does get, yeah, no, it is. It's, yeah. I think also the transition of wealth, always sitting with the man, both in Asia and Middle East, now that's changed. So women are becoming a lot more engaged, and more women in political positions as well. Okay,
that's very interesting. Shall we let Hannah maybe ask her question? She raised her hand first. She has been waiting for a long time now.
No, it's good to see that there's so many questions. But I wanted to come back a little bit to Sue's question before on the finding products that are sustainable to invest in, and that it's still quite difficult, and basically everyone in the past could call their product sustainable, and there was really no one to check it. Now we have, I guess, EU being the first one to really trying to regulate that, and having quite concrete steps on finding out what is a sustainable fund or not. Do you think that is a step in the right direction? Do we need regulation to step in to tell us what's green or not? And is it going to help the financial industry and especially retail investors?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, we need strong regulatory frameworks in every market, because what we have seen has ESG and sustainability has become sort of a trend and a buzzword. We've seen a lot of financial institutions say they're doing stuff, and to Sue's point, I mean, you know, look at all these banks coming out and saying, oh, we're net zero commitment, blah, blah, blah. They're all still investing in fossil fuels. We know that, right? So we need regulation to oversee the products that come onto market. So women like us are not told something's green and then find out it's not. I think, and I think the EU's been fantastic because it's very much ahead of the game. And obviously greenwashing is front and center in terms of EU regulations at the moment. One of the challenges, obviously, this lack of common definition and standard. I think this has been a major issue for a number of years. So what is sustainable investing? What falls into that definition is in and out. And that's why we do need ESG standards. And I think global standards of that for sure. The good news is that industry and regulators are working on it. So it should make it easier for retail investors like us. But it's still something to be very aware of. The other thing is we've had this discussion, and I think it depends on where you sit. You know, when we talk about what's in and what's out from a sustainability perspective, you know, I mentioned here being in the Middle East in terms of oil and fossil fuels. At some point, we have to discuss how we're going to transition, right? So you can go for green, but there are still companies and sectors that are brown that need funding to transition to more green alternatives. And so what we call transition finance or transition investing, that needs a lot of work doing on it, because what you don't want is, you know, oil and gas companies coming out and saying, yeah, we're accessing green finance, but they're not. So that level of transparency and everyone agreeing what matters and, you know, in terms of what's in and what's out is really important. I think also from a retail perspective, the lack of products, you know, is challenging. It's not easy to find a lot of products that suit what we want to do or what we prioritize. Again, I think that is changing, but probably not changing fast enough.
Great, thank you for the answer. Shall we let Cecilia ask her question? She has her hand raised.
Sorry, didn't find how to unmute myself quickly. I would be happy to if you can share your thoughts, Jessica, about the social media networks. And I recently had to listen to Nerina here. She has done a lot of studies about that people are becoming unhappy today compared to 10 years ago, and especially young women are becoming very unhappy. So, and I struggle a bit because I end up with a lot of equities from that type of companies in my portfolio. So I don't really know how to approach that topic. So it should be interesting to hear your view about how you think about it.
Yeah, and it's such a tricky question. And I think this sort of falls when we talk about environmental, social, and governance, when we come to the S component, the social bit, it's so difficult to sort of put in place KPIs and data and processes, because so much of it is a subjective position, right? I mean, when it comes to environmental, it's like clean tech, low carbon, you know, there are data points that we can grab, but on the S, it's much more difficult. I mean, I don't have an opinion on the social media companies per se from an investment perspective, just because it's just not my area. I mean, I do as a retail investor, you know, as a mother of 2 teenage daughters, I certainly do. But I do think that's the important thing about active ownership. You know, we're seeing a lot more investors become much more active in terms of their shareholdings. And I think, to me, I believe that's something to be encouraged. And maybe back to you, what do you think? And in terms of your work, do you think investors, large pension funds and investors should be being more vocal and active?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's tricky because it's more subjective. The environmental and climate change is more that you can ask the researchers about what we should do, and then you could push the companies to follow follow that part. But for being a woman and also having a daughter, I feel quite stressed about the social media implications for our girls. So
yeah, and I mean, one of the things from an individual investor perspective, and with the book, I try to be very practical and hands-on, because we can talk conceptually, but what does that mean tomorrow when you go, okay, I want to invest? And so I talk a lot in the book about a roadmap. So how do you start thinking about it? So you prioritize, you figure out what your boundaries are, and then you look for products. And to the point that I made earlier, it's like we cannot fix the world overnight. So when we make investment decisions, we have to prioritize the issues, the challenges, the risks that we want to focus on, certainly in that first instance. And I'm very clear with mine. So mine is gender equality and climate change. I made that decision a couple of years ago. That's what I want to focus on when I make investment decisions. And so those are the funds that I seek out, those are whatever. And as much as I want to make the world a better place, I have to be tangible and practical with those decisions, which is why I do sometimes revert back to the SDGs, because I do think they're this, they touch on every point and every value framework. So they do help you make a decision around what matters to you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Eileen Gustafsson also has a question. So Eileen, please go ahead.
Hi. Hi. I was just wondering also to be a little bit pragmatic, because you said you prioritize the values and so on, but then how do you prioritize the type of products that you will invest in? Because maybe if you prioritize gender equality, you'll find an ETF that is branded gender equal, or you'll find a climate ETF, Paris 9 or whatever, and there's so many out there now. But is it enough, or are you better off really actually going and picking the stocks? Or in your case, for example, you have access to angel network and you make direct investments in women that need the money, and that's wonderful, but maybe you need more capital to do so. So how do you go about choosing the asset class or the type of products that you end up investing in?
So I have to say, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a sustainable investment, responsible investment, advisor, like a sort of management consultant. So I don't do financial advice at all. So I think it's very much dependent on where you are, A, at your stage in life, B, how much time you've got to do this, and C, well, obviously how much wealth you've got. I think things like the investment apps have made it much more democratic to access investments, which I think that's definitely worth looking at. I always, I think the ETF, the fact that we can now access thematic ETFs is very helpful, because it does make it easy, particularly for us, like we've got very limited time. I mean, let's face it, the problem with searching out individual companies is it takes time. You go and read those sustainability reports, then you translate them into meaningful language to you. It's hugely time consuming. One of the things I do like is we know that women like to confer with their peers when they talk about money and investment. So I'm a big fan. And way back, I did want to set it up, but I just haven't had the time. But, female-focused investor networks, a bit like this is, right? Bringing women together and having those discussions. I mentioned the angel network that I got involved with when I moved over here. And what was so fascinating about it is that sort of 30 women, we did not put in much, right? We only put in sort of sort of relative, but there were not big sums of money, but we all came together to create this fund for 1 year. And it was just such a phenomenal experience, all of us sort of putting in our energy to do due diligence on these companies that were coming in, and it was so much fun. And I think, that sort of social aspect of this is really important, because women like to confer with their friends and their peers in doing that. In terms of asset classes, again, I think that really comes down to speaking to your financial advisor or your bank. I think obviously that angel investing is high risk, really high risk. I think, is it like something like 1 in 10 startups will be here in 5 years' time? I'm still hanging out for one of them to be you know, to be a success story. But at the end of the day, I also know that I've made an investment and choice that's very much aligned with my value framework. You know, and these, you know, the thing is, these companies founded by women generally are successful, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica and Eileen. I don't see any more questions in the chat or a raised hand, but I can ask a question because we have talked a lot about sustainability, but you said also that you focused a lot on diversity. So what do you focus when you're making an investment about the diversity area? What are your advice on that when making an investment?
Well, I think diversity, and obviously diversity is far beyond gender diversity. We know that companies that have a diverse senior management team are more sound and generally financially perform better financially. And so when I look, I look for ETFs that are diversity focused. I mean, I think the concern right now is they're still quite simple because they still talk just really about women on boards. And that's just one dimension. There are so many dimensions to diversity. So I think at the moment, it comes back to the lack of retail products available to really focus on things like diversity. But one interesting trend that piece of research that I found is that actually companies with more women on boards face less environmental legal liabilities than companies with more men on boards. And so to me, I quite often talk about that because it's demonstrative of the fact that, okay, you've got more women on boards or in leadership positions, you control risks better, you're more aware of your social license to operate in whatever your community or environment is. And so the evidence around diversity of thinking in terms of a company or a sector performing well is there. So I think hopefully there will be more products coming on board. And I think it is more than just women on boards, right? You know, there's so much to that. I have to tell you something funny though. So I said I was working for a Saudi client, and we're doing the strategic work, and one of our objectives is around diversity. So really diversity of customer base, diversity of funding for entrepreneurs and so forth. And one of my team members in the UK said, to fight diversity, you mean everything? And I'm like, no. Diversity means gender in Saudi Arabia. It does not mean any other kind of diversity. So it's sort of market relevant, right?
Yeah, and that is the follow-up question. How do you kind of perceive diversity, you know, in the Arab countries? You know, are they coming forward with that question, you know, not only at the company level, how you know, living there with your daughter, you know, I think it's quite different than from living in Europe and other countries. Maybe we can share a bit on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. And just from a personal perspective, I'm also a single mother. So it's even harder to be in a Middle Eastern country when you're a single woman. You know, I joke in that when I moved over here, I had to ask permission from the father of my children to sponsor their visas. And given that I'm the sole caregiver, to ask the permission, but that's telling of the Middle East. But that said, there is a lot of change afoot, and we're seeing some phenomenal, powerful women, well educated, in positions of power in the government, in regulators. You know, so I mentioned this Saudi bank that I'm working for. The chair of the board is a woman. The chief legal officer is a woman. The chief risk officer, the chief financial officer, all women. And how amazing is that, right?
Yeah, that's very positive, I would say. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I don't mean like they're not token positions. These are incredibly amazing women as well.
Yeah. Hannah has a question. Let's raise her hand.
Yeah, maybe less of a question, but also a comment on what you said earlier with prioritizing. I think that was actually a really, really important one, because and also the point that Cecilia made, that there are so many complex topics out there today, and it's very easy to get a bit stressed about where to start. And I think that was a very good point you make with starting to make one or two commitments that you want to start with and focus on that. I think that's extremely important, because I said, I mean, sometimes you don't know where to start, so you don't start at all.
Exactly. And I suppose that's sort of my key message in my book. What I want when the woman finishes reading, I want it to, and it's written in a very, not plain speaking, but it's written in a very chatty way, almost like I'm having a conversation with you. But what I wanted is the reader to put it down and go, okay, I've now got enough information to start making a plan. And whether that's plan, I go and speak to my partner, I go and speak to my bank, but I want to arm the reader with sufficient information to now feel a little bit more comfortable. And to your point, Hannah, not go, oh, it's too much, I can't do it. Because it is quite it's quite overwhelming, and it's not the easiest thing to do. But I think, you know, in the early stages, it's about getting educated, it's about getting empowered, and it can seem daunting. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, money can be a bit of an awkward conversation, but you know, the time is now, right? Don't shy away. Sustainable investing is our future. And I think it's something that everybody has to be involved in, you know, all of us and our children. We have all these different levers of change in our lives. Why should investing not be one of them? You know, our money and our wealth, it's incredibly powerful. You know, however small that is, don't waste that opportunity to use that lever of change to build the kind of world that you want to.
Thank you. We are coming up to the time, so maybe I have one last question. I think I found this session really interesting. We have maybe jumping from, you know, one argument to the other, but I love this discussion, open question from a lot of our members. Actually, I have just one last question, which is maybe standard, but what advice can you give to women in the audience today, like in terms of their careers and also developing how they want to be, you know, financial feminists? Maybe if you have some, you know, magic advice from your book or your research.
I don't know about you, I wish I had magic advice, you know.
And again, I think many of us as, you know, children, especially, you know, girls, but I think it's also important to, for those who says boys, you know, that respect women and educate them that, you know, in the future.
I don't know. I mean, and I don't know everybody's sort of age and generation, and I think, you know, this is our time, you know, and I say this to my daughters, it's like, don't shy away, right? This is our time. If we don't, I read something the other day, thinking differently is a gift. And I thought about that quite deeply, and I thought it is, right? Because I've always thought differently, but it is a gift. And I think, and that's the same with sustainable investing. Just because other people aren't doing it doesn't mean don't do it. Be empowered with your investment choices. Be empowered with your career choices, right? Now is the time for us to do it. And I just think sort of standing back and letting the world happen isn't the right option now. And that's the whole concept of financial feminism. It's not just about women investing more. It's about saying, look, this is the world I want to live in. This is what I want to do. These are the values that matter. You know, let's stop doing what we're doing to the world in terms of environmentally, inequality, all of those things. We can make a change happen. And I think we have to use every lever of change, as I said.
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting. And we really enjoyed meeting with you today virtually. Hopefully, you know, we'll be able to meet in person.
Well, everybody, you know, I'm in Dubai, but also connect with me on LinkedIn. I really like LinkedIn as a platform because I think it's a great way to have like intelligent conversations as well. So for sure. I
guess in a pre-COVID era, did you used to travel a lot to Europe and the Nordics? So hopefully, you know, soon you will be able to meet in place and have you one of our events. But really, thank you so much. It was really interesting to talk to you today. And thank you all for participating in the event. So and stay tuned for the next event on Syria Women Who Invest. So we really want to, you know, please come back with advice on new speakers and interesting topics, as I think this is an area that has a lot of potential. So we intend to do more during, you know, the first half of 2022 on this topic. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.